turn left, and I said, no, turn right, it's faster. And then that's the last thing I remember.
Quick note before today's conversation. You may have noticed the show has a new name. Who You Became. Same feed, same host, same kind of stories. The name finally matches what the show has always been about. Welcome back to Who You Became, a podcast about everyday people on the hard season that changed them, and the person they became on the other side. What you just heard was a 15-year-old boy headed to football camp, and in a split second, everything changed. Today's guest is Jacob Barneck, husband, father of 5, and someone whose story has stayed with me since the first time he told it to me. At 15, Jacob broke his back in a car accident and was left paralyzed. Doctors told him he'd never walk again. He told them they were wrong. And then he spent every night in a hospital bed staring at his toes, willing them to move. One day, they did. Jacob went and served a mission, met and proposed to his wife Amy on their very first date, and built a career solving complex problems at organizations like Goldman Sachs, Citibank, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and now USAA, where he's helped save nearly $500 million over the last 22 years. What sets Jacob apart isn't the resume, it's the way he sees life. He has a catchphrase he lives by: go make someone's day better. It's not just something he says, it's how he shows up every single day.
Jacob, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. I appreciate it, man.
As we dive in here, can you tell us a little bit about your early life and background?
Yeah. I grew up in a super small town, not really super small, but a small town. It was a town of, there were 4,000, 4,500 people, and I lived 8-10 miles outside of town on 80 acres of land, and the nearest neighbor was roughly a mile away. And so I had my brothers and sister and my mom and dad. And like we went to church and we did all those things, but ultimately we were raised, we had 15 horses and, a huge garden that we had to take care of. And I can't tell you how many, like reams of wood that I chopped when I was younger, right?
Whoa.
And so stuff like that, all that, just kind of living in the country type of stuff. Super awesome. My parents hunted all the time. We hunted. We did all kinds of fun stuff. We had a freezer in the back that was always full of some sort of meat. It was pretty cool. And so, it's just kind of, it's all I knew, right? And, growing up, I was just always that kid too that was just kind of talking to everybody and would always, say, kind of do weird things to people just because I just liked people. And my parents, were obviously very glad that I was positive, but, there's one time, ultimately growing up, we were at church on Sunday and we lived next to an Indian reservation, but there's where I grew up, there really wasn't any black people in the area, right? And so, but a black person came to visit the ward, and I think it was either me or actually my little brother, I can't remember, but we asked him if he ate a lot of chocolate donuts, and we just didn't understand, just because of where we had grown up, just like, just didn't really know and understand, and had no real definition of what difference was, and we didn't think people were different either. It's just that kind of that's where we came from. And so, I had a lot of friends that were on the tribe out there at the Ute Indian tribe growing up, and just great friends and good opportunity to learn and grow. And that's kind of where I started and where my background was, and kind of went through all that process. And through that time frame, from the age of 0 to 15, I was just a regular kid, just kind of running around doing everything. And one of the biggest things that I love to do is actually run. I love to run, and we would run from our house to the bus stop, which was about half a mile away. And so it was just, people talk about running up, going to school in the middle of winter, uphill both ways in a foot of snow, right? Like sometimes it was actually kind of like that for us, And so it wasn't really uphill, but it was flat, and it was a 2 foot of snow. We'd have to run to the bus stop and do all these other things. And so, but we didn't know any better. We just thought it was the greatest thing ever. But I ran everywhere. My parents would, tell me to slow down all the time. And, I ran, I played all kinds of sports in high school, and I ran track. And after a track workout, I'd run to the locker room, and then I'd run to the car to go. I just ran everywhere. I loved doing it. And, I was pretty quick, and I won a few races for sure. I loved playing football. It was one of my favorite things. And, just that's kind of who I was, right? And I had my big brother that I, was ahead of me, a couple years ahead of me in school, and he played basketball and loved sports. And my little brother was like, hey, let's do everything together. And he was just 11 and a half months younger than I was. And so he was just right there. No, wait, he was 11 months younger than I was. And he was really close after me. And so we were best friends growing up too. And so, but when I was 15, I was headed to a football camp I'd played that sophomore year of high school. I played for the football team, and I was going to run the receiver drills and be a part of varsity that next year as a junior. And but I'd left all my football stuff home. And my parents had gone to Salt Lake City, which was 2.5 hours ultimately away from where I lived. And when they left, my mom tells me that she said to come straight home from school and don't do anything. And I always listen to my mom, of course, right? But like, she would have said it's fine if you're going to the football camp. It would have been, but like, this was also back in the day where there's no cell phones. There's nothing like that. No one knew where anybody was until they got to where they were supposed to be. And so I got a ride home from my friend to go get my football stuff, and my little brother was coming to the football camp with me. And so we got in the car, and I was tying my shoes, and we were headed out the driveway of my house, and my little brother said, turn left, and I said, no, turn right, it's faster. And then that's the last thing I remember. And so on the way home, it had started to rain. On the way back into town, we were going up some hills that were by my house, and there's a windy road, and something happened to my friend Donnie's door, and she went to kind of adjust the door or close it or to do something. She just lost control of the car. We swerved off the road. We launched off a 4-foot cliff drop-off thing, hit a ditch, and rolled a bunch of times. And I was thrown out during that process because I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. It was in 1992, right? And so seatbelts were there, but they weren't super law. There was a law, but no one was really doing them yet. And, and we usually wore seatbelts as a family, but I was tying my shoes. I was getting ready to go play football. And so I got thrown out. I had a skull fracture. And my eyelash was almost ripped off. They didn't think I had an eyeball. I broke my back, all kinds of crazy stuff. My little brother got out of the car. He just thought I was dead when he got out of the car. So he just started running for help because we were literally in the middle of nowhere. So he had to run, quarter of a mile, half a mile somewhere to the nearest neighbor and get the phone and that's on the wall and dial 911, and so he did that. And then on the way back, luckily there was an 18-wheeler that had come down that road, and he saw the accident and he radioed it in. And so there were some, cops and ambulance that were on their way. And, this is all stories that people tell me. I don't know. I don't remember any of it. But, my parents were actually on their way home from Salt Lake. They didn't know anything about it. Right. And so there were people, placed at every turn that my parents could have gone to come home. And there was 3 possible directions that they could have actually made it to go home. And they turned down one road, and one of my mom and dad's friends were there, and they said, hey, you need to get to the hospital as soon as you can. Jacob's been in an accident. And so my mom and dad just take off, and they go. And the cops were waiting for him too, and the cops saw him, and they were trying to give I love my dad to death. He's so awesome and so smart. But my dad was going so fast, cops couldn't even give him an escort. An escort, yeah. Couldn't even think of it. He was just going so fast. So he got there, and they got to the hospital, and I guess that I wouldn't let me leave. I had to be life flighted to the University of Utah Hospital, which was in Salt Lake City, but I wouldn't let them leave until I talked to my mom. And this is a different, maybe we can talk more about this portion of the story later, but I had actually kind of made a bad decision. I got in a fight earlier that day with somebody because they had beat up one of my friends, and I was kind of protecting them. But I wouldn't let them leave until I talked to my mom. So when my mom came up and she talked to me, I said, "Mom, I just want to let you know that I was in a fight today, but he hit me first." All right. So because my dad was always like, "Hey, just it's okay. Just make sure you don't start everything, right?" Like just that's kind of just how my dad raised me, and I was always there to kind of help people and protect my friends and do certain things. I was just kind of that kid, and so that situation happened. There's way more to that as well, but I was life flighted. My grandma and grandpa live in Salt Lake, so my grandma, and she was a nurse growing up, so she met me at the hospital. I don't remember any of this, but she met me at the hospital. She was there. My mom and dad went home, packed, and then started driving again the 2.5 hours to Salt Lake City. By the time they had got to the hospital, I was already in surgery, and ultimately, like, kind of just long story short, after the surgery, they're like, "Hey, unfortunately, Jacob's break in his back is just too severe, right? He's going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He's never going to walk again. You're going to have to kind of walk him through that process, right?" And so, and I don't remember anything for about a week, honestly. So I went through that surgery. I remember waking up one time and I was like, "What is going on? This is just, and my mom told me, 'Hey, you broke your back, you're probably, they say you're never going to walk again.' I said, 'Mom, it's going to be fine. I'll be all right. Don't worry about it. I'll walk again. It'll be okay.' She said, 'Okay,' kind of thing. And, and then we kind of went through, and I kind of remember a little bit more that second week. And then during that second week, what they had put on my legs was these little things that like would pump up certain sections. It's like air would fill up, and so it'd keep the circulation going in my legs because I wasn't moving my legs or doing anything. When I broke my back, I was 15 years old. I was almost 6 foot tall, and I weighed 165 pounds. I was a big kid, and I like I said, I loved to run. My legs were just super strong. They went everywhere. You could see every muscle in my legs. It was awesome. They were my pride and joy, honestly. And so after they took those things off my legs, like my legs were literally gone. Like there was nothing left. It just sweated out every weight and muscle. I went in to the hospital again weighing 165 pounds. I came out weighing 110 pounds. I lost like 50 pounds in the hospital, and it was all most of it was in my legs. They were virtually gone when I got. So I spent 7 weeks in the hospital. The first week was in intensive care. Then there was another 2 weeks in a regular hospital bed. I had to have another surgery because there were some bone fragments still kind of stuck in my spinal cord, and it was causing pretty severe headaches for me. I don't really remember those either, luckily. But after we kind of got all that taken care of, they were like, "Hey, we're going to get you to physical therapy. We're going to teach you how to live in a wheelchair for the rest of your life because you're never going to walk again." And I said, "Oh, I'll be all right. I'll walk again. Don't worry about it." And they're like, "Okay." They were just like, "All right." But then they started teaching me how to walk again. But every time they would talk to me, every time a doctor would come in, they'd be like, "Hey, you're going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life. You're never going to walk again. We're just going to teach you how to." And every time I'd be like, "It'll be okay. I'm going to walk again. It's going to be all right." And and they're like, "Okay." And eventually that happened so much that they suggested that I go talk to a psychiatrist. So me and my parents go into this psychiatrist guy, and he starts talking to me and asking questions and going through certain things. And I don't remember anything that he really asks, but I remember just answering the questions and saying that I would walk again and all these other things. And I do know at the end, he basically was like, "There's really nothing wrong with you. You are just unbelievably positive." And so I was like, "Yes, that's me." And I've always been that way. And I don't know why. I was raised right. I have great parents and I have a good family. But I have always been just super positive person. I've always known for the rest of my life, from the time I was born, and I'll always know for the rest of my life, that there's nothing I can do about yesterday. I can only do what's possible today, and then what's going to be available tomorrow, right? But I've always known that, and it's always been something that drove that. So when I broke my back, and they were they were like, "Hey, you're never going to walk again," I was like, "I'll be able to walk again. What do I need to do to make this happen?" It wasn't like, "Oh no, this horrible thing happened to me." It was more, "Okay, how do I need to overcome this? What do I need to do to kind of make this happen?" And so it was I'm super blessed to have that attitude and that upbringing and being that positive, because that changed everything for me, right? If I can just imagine, and I have tons of friends that are in some sort of wheelchair, they have another disability or something along those lines. They don't think the way I think. It's hard for them to think that way. They're depressed, and they're down in the dumps just because they don't get to do the same thing that they get to do, right? That they used to do. And so I try and I've done my best throughout my life to kind of point them in the right direction, kind of do those things. And so it was a crazy experience for sure. That time, I was 15. I spent my junior and senior year in a wheelchair. The end of, but like I did start to move, and I did start to walk a little bit. And what happened was, because they were ultimately so negative in the hospital, I was like, I'm just going to do everything possible I can to get out of here as quick as I can. So I only spent 4 weeks in physical therapy. And then I was like, I learned to do everything that they wanted me to do in a wheelchair. I could get in and out of a wheelchair. I could shower myself. I could go to the bathroom. I could do all of those things. I learned how to do all of that in 4 weeks. And they're like, no one's ever done that before. Like, usually it's way longer than that, but I got discharged after 4 weeks. And one of the things that happened, again, throughout that process, those 4 weeks that I remember, and, I just had this thing, like, I just felt like my legs would move. I just felt like it would. And so every night after therapy and after everything was going on, everything settled down, my parents are gone, I would just look at my toes, and I would just try and move my toes. And I just felt like they were moving. In my brain, it just felt like they were moving. And so I did that every night. Literally every night for 4 weeks. I was just, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And so the day after I got home from the hospital, I was talking to my friends. There were some friends coming over, and we were talking about, all the events of the next year, and, junior prom, and going to graduate and do all these other things. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to walk to prom. And they're like, really? And I said, yeah, watch this. And my big toe moved. And I was like, I was like, wait a second. They're like, did you see that? Did you do that? And I said, I did that. Did you? And I moved it like 3 times. It just literally just a little bit of a nudge, right? And I said, go get my mom and dad. And so my friends went in and got my mom and dad. My mom came in, and my dad came in, and they were like, what's going on? I said, watch this. And my toe wouldn't move anymore. And I was like, hold on a second. It did move. I promise. I kind of just rested for a little bit, just kind of hung out. And then I tried to do it again. It moved 2 more times. And so I was like, it was super, super cool experience. But the other thing that happened is, after those 5 times of moving my toe, I was dead tired. I was worn out. It was so crazy. And so I took a nap. All my friends were there. I took a nap. I was hanging out. There wasn't a bedroom or a bathroom on the main floor of our house either. And so I lived in our like living room area on a hideaway bed and all this other stuff, when I came home from the hospital. So we're all hanging out, and I just fell asleep on that bed that I was just hanging out. And so, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes later, I guess I woke up, and then we went to, go do some more stuff. And we were going to go to like a steak dance for the, like a LDS steak dance. And we went to my friend's house, and there was a whole bunch of us there. There was probably 15 or 20 of us there. And I showed everybody I could move my toe again, and like everybody's super excited. I moved it like 4 times that time, and I fell asleep again. And it was like, and there was everybody doing stuff around me. There was like a party going on. I fell asleep on the couch. And so we were like an hour late to the dance, all this other stuff. But we went to the dance and all this other things. And so from that time forward, I would just move my toe till it wouldn't move anymore. And then pretty soon the other toes would move. And I'd move them till they wouldn't move anymore. Then my foot started to move. My legs started to move. And then, probably about 3 weeks to a month later, my right toe on my right foot started to move, and so my right leg and right foot never really got as much strength as my left foot, and left leg. But, I got to where I walked without a cane and without crutches and without braces. It got super tired, and it was really, and I fell down a lot, but I could still do it. And so, there's, after that too, like I went to college, I graduated from high school, I walked through graduation, and and then I went to college, and then through my college career, I went to Institute. I decided to go on a mission, and I went on a mission, and that's the thing that kind of changed things quite a bit for me as well. Is because on a mission you walk a lot, right? I had a car my entire mission. I was lucky enough to have a car, but we still tracked it. We still walked a lot. And so the first month of my mission, we were in a brand new area, me and my companion. Nobody had ever been there. They opened up this new area. And so we were walking everywhere, and I was in so much pain. It was crazy. So I had left my wheelchair home, but I had my dad ship it out to me so I could use it. And I used it for another month. But then because I was walking so much, after that, I just didn't need it anymore. And I had my cane, and I would walk, but I was just walking everywhere. It was crazy. And so that was a pretty big turning point for me, for sure, because I knew I could do it. I knew it was there. And so my last area of my mission, I spent 9 months in that area. And the mission president was Richard S. Nixon. He wasn't, obviously, it was a different Richard Nixon. And but he came up to for a zone conference. We came up to zone conference one time, and it was actually like it was right after my mom. It was right after my grandma's husband. So it was my step grandpa. He'd actually passed away, and so I got to call and talk to them, but it was right before that zone conference that Richard Nixon had met me, and he knew who I was. We met him a couple of times, but that zone conference, he came up to me in that zone conference, and he was like, "Hey, Elder Barneck, I think that you need to give me your cane for the rest of your mission." Oh. And I had 7 months left of my mission, and I was like, he was like, "I just feel like that you need to give me your cane," and I was like, "Okay, well, let me think about it, right? Let me, what do I need to do?" And so I prayed about it a little, I guess. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I do remember, he's like, during zone conference, kind of things were finished up, and he had missionaries come up and bear their testimony. He's like, and I want Elder Barneck to come up and bear his testimony. And I don't remember anything that I said. I went up and bore my testimony, and then at the end, I was like, and for some reason, I've got to give my cane to President Nixon. So here you go, President. And then I just walked back to my seat and sat down, and I didn't have my cane for the rest of my mission.
No way.
Yeah. So I walked for 7 months. Granted, for stairs and hills, my companion was always there, so I had something to hold on to for some stairs. But I got to where I walked without a cane for, the last 7 months of my mission. Just everywhere I went, I didn't even have a cane. Wow. And so really good. Well, and again, it wasn't 100% normal. It was actually pretty good, right? But you could tell there was something wrong when I was walking. It was just one of those things. And that's actually during the time that I met my wife. So
no way.
Yeah.
You met your wife on your mission?
Yeah. So she came out to Sacramento. She was a Temple Square sister missionary, and she was at Salt Lake City, Temple Square. And then for 4 months, they do a proselyting mission. She came out, and I was her district leader for 1 month. And so, I met her, and I was a district leader over me and my companion and 6 sister missionaries for half of my mission, more than half my mission, 15 months or so. I barely knew who elders were. I knew who all the sisters were. So anyway, I met her. It was pretty awesome. She was great. Sister missionaries are fine, but I had sworn off sister missionaries. Honestly, I said, I'm never marrying a sister missionary. Yeah, it was kind of funny. So we talk about that every once in a while. But as she went back to her mission, we wrote letters, because that's what you did back in the day. And then I went home, and then I stopped writing her. It was just kind of one of those things, And so I didn't need mail anymore. I wasn't on a mission. Plus I had 2 jobs, and I was going to be an EFY counselor back in the day. So especially the what is it? Especially for youth stuff now. It used to be EFY. Now it's something else. I can't remember the name of it now that I think about it. But so I was going to be a counselor, and I went out to the avenues where my brother lived, and that's just north of Salt Lake, Temple Square, right? And I was sitting there. My brother was at work, and I was waiting because I was going to spend the night there and then drive to the training for EFY like the next day. And I was sitting there. I was like, oh man, like, oh shoot, Sister Highland's just down the road at Temple Square. I need to go say hi. So I drove down to Temple Square, and I started walking around Temple Square to try and find people that knew her. And I asked a bunch of missionaries, and finally found a missionary that knew who she was. And she said, oh yeah, I know Sister Highland. She went home today. And I was
No
like,
way.
you got to be kidding me. So this was in 1997, right? And so there wasn't like the internet was there, but it wasn't like prevalent. My brother did have the internet as dial up and all this other stuff. And so I logged in and I went online, and because she had given me her address in my Franklin Day Planner back in the day. She'd given me her address, but she didn't put her phone number down. Oh. So I was like, well, is that a, whatever, right? It wasn't a sign. I decided to call her anyway. So I looked up Highlands in Lufkin, Texas, where she lived. And luckily there was only one Highland, Dennis Highland in Lufkin, Texas. I said, it's got to be them. So I called and asked for Sister Highland, and it was her mom. And her mom's like, Amy, it's a boy. I was like, yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation. And so just so you can see, get a little bit more of the attitude and personality of my wife, right? Like I talked to her for a minute. I said, hey, how are you doing? How do you like being home? Do you know who this is? And she said, just keep talking. She didn't know who it was, right? Yeah. So I just kept talking. We asked her a few more questions. She's like, oh, I know who this is. And I was like, who is this? She's like, you're the jerk that stopped writing me.
No!
Yeah. So, and I was like, yes, I am. I totally was that guy. And so I said, I'm sorry. And then we talked for a while. I said, hey, because I knew from conversations we had through letters and some other things that she was going to be coming to Utah to go to college. Her brother lived out there and do some other things. And so I said, hey, when you come to Utah, maybe we could get together and do something sometime.
Yeah.
And so we, a week later or so, she calls me, right? And I think we talked for like 6 hours that time.
Whoa.
So it was like, that was a kind of a different thing, right? And so, but that was also back in the day when, long distance wasn't free, right? And so we talked a lot after that. And so each of the parents had roughly about $1,000 phone bill. And they were not very excited about that. And so I think ultimately, like either my dad or her dad was like, you better marry that guy or something, right? Because of all the money that they spent. And so I had a couple of jobs, and I bought her a plane ticket. I bought a ring, and I bought her a plane ticket. All right. And so you
guys haven't seen each other since the mission.
No, hadn't seen each other since the mission. Just wrote letters and talked. But I've always had this, I don't know what it's called, but I've always had this knowledge of things from God ultimately, right? Yeah. Like I always knew I was going to be okay. I got comforted from priesthood blessings throughout my entire accident issue, and on my mission I had all these other things. And then when I prayed, I just had this. I would always get these. I never got like a yes or a no. I just always had a comforting feeling, right? And so I had prayed and basically told God that I thought that Amy was supposed to be my wife. And I just felt good about it. I didn't get a yes or a no. I just felt good about it. So I knew it was supposed to happen. And so I bought her a plane ticket. I bought a ring. I bought her a plane ticket. And I didn't really plan on, exactly what to do. But I did do a lot of work to figure out where her dad was, because they had moved from the time that I had, he was moving. They moved from Lufkin, Texas to Tyler, Texas. Okay. And which wasn't that far, but he was a manager of JCPenney, so he moved around a lot. And so I knew he was up in Tyler, but he wasn't at the home, so I couldn't call their house. So I did all this finagling. I can't remember exactly what I did, but I was looking online. I was doing all kinds of stuff. I finally figured out where the store was and where he might be, and I got a hold of him at the hotel he was staying at, which was the Residence Inn down there in Tyler, Texas. And I guess Amy's older brother and his wife were at the hotel at the time that I called, and they were talking about some things. And I called and I introduced myself. I said, Dennis, I know we've only had a couple conversations here and there, but I bought Amy a plane ticket, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to ask her to marry me while she's out here. Can I have her hand in marriage? And he's like, I guess if she says yes, it'll be okay, right? So he's been the greatest father-in-law ever, right? He's such a great guy, so amazing, and such a good example to me. And so that kind of happened, it was crazy. So she landed, and we went on a date with one of my old companions on my mission, and his fiance, because they were going to get married, and we went to a movie, did all these other things, and then we started on the trek home to Roosevelt, Utah, which is 2.5 hours from Salt Lake City, and just talking and figuring things out. And so we finally get close to my house, and we're coming up over the hill above my house, and I'm like, all right, you ready to meet my parents? And I'm about to turn into my driveway. She's like, I'm not ready to meet your parents. I'm like, okay. So I backed up and I left. I went back up on the hill, just kind of hung out. We just talked for a minute. Of course, we probably kissed a couple times, of course. But, somehow I accidentally mentioned talking to her dad. And because I had this big plan, this whole romantic thing that I thought was going to be, I'm going to go do this, and this is how I'm going to ask my wife to marry me, and didn't happen. Because she's like, why did you talk to my dad? And I was like, oh, crap, I don't know what to say. Like, she was, like, pretty adamant, like, trying to figure out why I was talking to her dad. And I'd had the ring in my pocket the entire time. Throughout the dinner, throughout the movie, throughout the date, throughout the drive home, the ring was in my pocket. And so we were sitting there in my truck. We were just kind of hanging out. And I was like, okay, well, I had to ask your dad a question, and ultimately, I asked him if it'd be okay if I married you. So I pulled the ring out and I said, so will you marry me? And she was like, looks at me. She's like, yes. And I was like, okay, good. We're good to go. And so the two truths and a lie thing that people do all the time to kind of get to know people. That's one of my truths that everybody says is a lie. It's like, I asked my wife to marry me on our first date.
No way.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we knew each other. We experienced each other through, time spent on the mission, and then we talked for quite a bit. But on our first official date, I asked her to marry me.
That's
she said yes.
crazy.
So people are always like, there's no way that happened. And so right now, to this day, it'll be 28 years of marriage this year.
Congratulations.
And we've got 5 kids, and like, everything's fine. We're good to go. And, it's just, you just have to have a common goal, right? For sure. You have to be willing to overlook some other, things, of course, right? Marriage isn't easy, but it can be, just as long as you're okay with where you're both going and you're willing to communicate. So, I was lucky enough to find somebody who was willing to put up with me, right? And Amy, and she's amazing. So that's kind of where we've been now. Like, we moved to Texas after we got married, and I started my college, finishing up college. I started working at different places, different careers. I've been in people planning and business intelligence for 20 years, right? And so I moved around. I will tell, make sure you get your degree as quick as possible, because I waited too long to get my degree, thinking it's okay because I've got enough experience. I'll be able to move up. It's going to be okay. I'm really good at what I do. And I am. I was really good at what I do. Because I think one of the big things that I know that I learned from being in my wheelchair for a while and learning how to overcome, kind of what happened is I became a really good problem solver, right? And that's all I've done my entire career. It's just solve problems. And so I've been really good at solving problems to where I've saved organizations as a whole over the past 22 years now, almost $500 million in funds, right? In people cost, in process improvement, all that other stuff. So Blue Cross Blue Shield, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, now at the USAA, like all kinds of things, just saving millions of dollars in cost because of what I can do.
Half a
Right?
billion dollars.
Half a billion. Half a billion. It's half a billion. It's pretty crazy when I think about it like that. And it's just like how, when you look at it, the way that businesses work and the way that businesses run, there's always a budget. There's always some finance team that says this is the way that things need to go. And a lot of times they'll use ratios or do something else because that's just kind of all that they know, right?
Yeah.
But you come in and you actually start putting some true numbers behind really what's happening. Like, you've got how many customers that create this much workload for your people, for your employees. And how long does it take to get through that workload? And then if it takes that long to get through that workload, they got to take a break. They got to go to lunch. They got to take PTO. They got to call in sick every once in a while. But if you plan that appropriately and you schedule it out accordingly, then you've got people where someone in finance says, hey, you need 300 people to do the work that your customers are generating. You do this right, you really only need like maybe 175.
Whoa.
Right? So you go from 300 people that you're paying, right, down to 175. Now, luckily, where I've been in most of my career, we've just lifted and shifted those people. There haven't been really any major layoffs, but that's usually what would happen, right? Like, hey, I don't need you. We're going to lay people off. But we were able to find different things and different avenues for most of those people to find jobs. So it was a pretty major savings in this one area. Instead of having 300 people, we now have 175, right? And so, on average, with benefits and all of that fun stuff, just say someone makes $65,000 to $75,000 a year, you save 150 of those people. It's a little bit of money, right?
Yeah,
and so every year. So that's been pretty awesome to be able to do that. Now I've fallen into financial crimes at USAA, doing the same thing. It's super awesome to be able to, kind of help them know and understand that we've got to shave off a couple minutes here. So we got to find all this information so that we can make a faster decision. Because most of what we do at USAA in financial crimes, the members don't even know. Like, we think there's something going on. It could be them. We don't know if it's them or not. And we'll look at it and be like, nope, it's actually them. And a majority of it is, but we're just trying to be careful, right? So the majority of what's happening is them, right? And so then we'll just let it go, just move on, right? But it takes a long time to do that. So it's kind of a sunk cost, right? Of just a part of doing business just to make sure the customer's happy. Right? But if we can get to that decision faster, if we can figure out that, yeah, this is actually them, it's a true and valid transaction, then we don't have to have as many people looking at it. And so that's the next steps for what's going on at USAA and financial crimes. Again, there's so much going on. It's going to be super crazy. But every bank, every business, everything deals with fraud and activity. So everybody's doing the same thing. They're all trying to find some way to make sure that you as a customer are taken care of, but by still making sure that fraud isn't happening, right? So it's pretty cool. So I've been doing that for a while. It's been pretty fun. But as much as I've done and all that's going on, I've kind of really, just kind of been coasting. I've just kind of been out there, right? Like I'll go do my job. I'll take care of my family, and then that's it. I'm not doing anything else, right? And so, one of the major reasons for that is because, after I broke my back, there's a lot of nerve damage, of course, right? Even though I can walk and a little bit, and I can stand and I can do things, and I walked for years, but I'm back to using my wheelchair now because, man, I'm almost 50. I'm just old, just one of those things. And so the older you get, like my right leg never really came back, and so as I would walk, like the pain would just be worse, right? Because it was just, I would work out or do something and like that nerve pain would just come, right? And so as much as I love to work out and I like to do stuff, I didn't really like the pain afterwards. I would push through it as much as I could, but I dealt with it like this entire time. So 35 years now since I broke my back, I've been dealing with this nerve pain. And so
that's a long time.
It's a long time, yeah. And Amy's such a trooper. She's like, you need to go to the doctor. You need to do this. You need to do that. And I'm like, there's nothing for it. You can't fix a nerve. You can't fix nerve pain. Maybe they can now. Who knows, right? It's possible, but anything is possible, I think. But at the same time, I'm like, what if I go and I go back and they're like, hey, I think we can fix you. And They give me something, some shot, some stem cell, something, right? And then it doesn't really work 100%, but it brings more pain instead of actually fixing anything. And I'm like, I'm good with the pain I got. I'm used to it. I'm okay, right? Yeah. And so that's just kind of where I've been, what I've dealt with. But I've been pushing through it the whole time. And as you go throughout your life, right? Even though I've been dealing with all of that, I think as long as I was focused on other people, as long as I was focused on my family, as long as I was focused on something, there was less pain. And so that was really cool. And so I was always there to try and help people as much as I could. In the church that we are in, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, people move a lot. I helped a lot of people move throughout my career. No way. Right? I was a makeshift dolly half the time. They'd put the couch on one side and then just pull me along the way, right? Because I'd be in my chair. And so, but as long as I was helping people, there was less pain, right? Yeah. And so, I know that if you just keep moving forward, everything's gonna be okay. And I've always done that my entire career and my entire life until about 14, 15 months ago. Now, my parents turned me on to a supplement that I take, and I started taking 2 supplements that completely changed the pain in my life. Right. And it kind of opened my eyes again to kind of what was going on. It brought me back to understanding of where I wanted to be and that I wasn't quite there and that I had more to do in this life. Right. My story, I love my story. I'll talk about myself all the time. I think it's something that will help people a lot. Right. So I need to do that. That's ultimately what this brought me back to. So because of those supplements, I have way less pain. I still have pain. I'm not 100% cured, but I have so much less pain that it's super easy for me to be like, okay, let's go do something, right? Oh. I'll go spend more time with the kids. I do different things. I go on more dates with my wife. There's just all these things that I can do. And so over this past year and 15 months or so, I've just kind of got back into I need to have a dream again. I need to accomplish my goals. And my goals are to, just leave people better than I found them, right? Yeah. And so if I can do that just by sharing my story, maybe turning them on to the supplements that help me, or do something that just makes their day better. So I coined my catchphrase, which I do tell people all the time, is like, go make someone's day better. Because you have such an opportunity as an individual to touch somebody. You don't know who it's going to be. And there's somebody out there that only you can touch too, right? And there's probably more than just one. So your experience, your life, what you go through, someone else is doing it too. Someone else has that same thing. And so I'll tell my story as much as I can, because one, I feel so much better, and I know that it's something that can help people. And so that's my goal. So now as I'm going through and I'm trying to decide, what do I need to do for the rest of my life? Right. Again, I'm only 50. I'm super young, right? Yeah. It's not 50 yet though. I'm only 49, but I'll be 50 this year. But I know roughly, a couple thousand people. Easy. Yeah. Like, for sure. So I'm like, okay, well, so I was trying to figure out how could I mark something that I could accomplish? And so I want to positively influence the lives of 10,000 people. Oh. And so that's what I'm going to do. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know what's going to happen. But one of the reasons why I was like, yeah, Julian, let's do this. I'd love to do a podcast because hopefully it'll help touch somebody's life and it'll make their life a little bit easier. Because as you go through your life, there's always going to be something. There's always going to be a trial. There's going to be something difficult. You might get laid off. You might not have a job for a while. You might, lose a, loved one. You might, get divorced. You might, break up with a girlfriend. There's so many things that you have to go through in your life. And so just making sure that you can know and understand that it's going to be okay at the other end, right? There's nothing you can do about yesterday. You can only focus on what you can do today and what are your opportunities for tomorrow. So go make someone's day better. That's ultimately what I want to do. So that's me, and that's why I'm here. So
I love that. And one of the ways that you're doing that right now is with these supplements. Tell us a little bit about the supplements
Yeah.
that have been helping you. I would love to have the listeners
Yeah.
either learn more about it or find ways to reduce the pain in their own lives.
Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. So the company that I got turned on to is called Common Sense Wellness Worldwide, because they had been a part of some other companies and some other organizations that just, changed formulas, increased price, like made it to where things were just difficult for people to, be a part of. And so the founders of this company were like, we're not going to do that. We're going to be debt free. We're going to create something that works, and it's going to be amazing. And so I take the Brain Sense. It's called CS Brain Sense, and then CS Muscadine. Brain Sense has every vitamin, mineral, and amino acid that you ultimately need in your body. But it's in a way that it breaks through the blood-brain barrier. It's a micronutrient that feeds your brain. And if you feed your brain, then your body ultimately can take care of itself, right? Because your body is an amazing thing, right? You're God's greatest form and greatest creation, right? So if you feed your brain, it'll take care of it, right? The muscadine itself, super crazy thing. It's a grape that's found in the southern United States. It's got an extra chromosome, and what happens is you can slice a piece of that grape. As long as it's on the vine, it'll regrow and heal itself and become a full whole grape again.
Whoa!
Yeah. So now they're taking that grape, they turn it into an oil, they turn it into a supplement you take. And so I take 9 pills of that every single day. I take 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, and 3 at night. And I take 3 of the Brain Sense and 3 of the Brain Sense. So I take 6 pills every time I take stuff. So I take between 6 and 9 Brain Sense, but I take almost 9 muscadine every single day. The Brain Sense, again, feeds the brain, gives me the opportunity. I could take more depending on what's going on. The muscadine increases the circulation in my body. And so that's kind of what, those two things, the combination of those two things have completely changed the pain that I have, right? So I've got my brain being fed, right? So it knows what to do with all of my body is being told what to do with everything that's going on. And the muscadine increases the circulation, which is a pretty major thing for individuals with, paralysis and disability. Circulation is important. And so for sure that helps. And it's also anti-inflammatory, it helps all kinds of things. And so I've been able to, get people to take that muscadine, and I've got stories just of individuals that I know personally where they couldn't get up and down stairs. Now they're walking up and down stairs, right? They had pain in their back for the past 15 years because of some slip disc or something. There's nothing they could do about it. Didn't want to have surgery. Now they don't have that pain, right? It's just so many things that are happening with those people. And, it's because of these. There's a way more than just those 2 supplements. And, I drink one of their, energy drinks every single day now because it's a natural caffeine. It's not synthetic caffeine, so it doesn't increase my heart rate, and I don't get the jitters, and I don't get a crash. And so I haven't had a soda for maybe just going to dinner with the family. I used to drink a Route 44 Dr. Pepper from Sonic and a couple cans of Mountain Dew almost every single day.
Whoa!
And I don't do that anymore. And so I just feel so much better. There's just so there's a lot, and it's for sure. I'd love to share my story with even more of what's going on with anybody that would want to reach out, because that's one of the reasons I think that I'll be able to help the most people and positively influence the lives of 10,000 people. Is because I'm going to be able to expand, where this product is going and what's happening with it, and people are just going to start to feel better and feel more joy in their life. That's the other thing, and just be happier. Brain Sense is going to be able to help people be just happier. It's pretty cool stuff.
Way cool.
Yeah.
If you could give one piece of advice to someone going through a similar challenge, what would it be?
Yeah. Love that, right? So I think that one piece of advice would be, don't worry about yesterday. Only focus on today, right? There's nothing you can do about whatever's happened to you in your life. There's nothing you can do to change what's going on. You can only change how you react to whatever happened, right? And so that brings me back to my favorite quote of all time, right? And I can't remember exactly who said it because my brain's going a little crazy right now. But ultimately, it's life is 90% of what happens, 10% of what happens to you, and 90% of how you react to it. And so it is with you. You're in charge of your attitude. You have a choice every single day to wake up and choose to be happy, wake up and choose to move forward, wake up and choose to overcome whatever happened to you yesterday. You have that choice. If you choose not to, you got to figure out how to choose the other direction, right? That's the piece of advice that I would give anybody, and especially those that might be going through the same thing. But in your life, you have a choice every single morning. Is it going to be a good day or a bad day? Bad day. So choose to make it a good day, and then also choose to go make someone's day better, because that'll make it a good day too. So
I love that. Well, Jacob, thank you for taking the time today to share your shows, to share your story, to share your experience, and ultimately to share that hope in the world. So
yeah,
I appreciate having you, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
What a conversation with Jacob Barneck, a kid who ran everywhere because that's who he was, breaks his back at 15 and wakes up being told he will never walk again. His response was not grief, not anger. It was simply, it's going to be fine, I'll walk again. And he did. He walked into every season that came after. He has been moving forward every single day. Jacob's on a mission to influence 10,000 lives. Part of that journey has included some personal discoveries around health, managing pain, that has helped him show up more fully for the lives of the people he loves. If you'd like to learn about what's been working for him, all the links are on the show note. And if you haven't already, subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people find these conversations. Until next time, remember, you don't just survive what happens to you, you become someone because of it.